This segment of Delmarva Life is brought to you by Tunnell and Raysor.
You know, we hear all the time about the dangers of drunk driving, and yet the message still doesn't seem to sink in for a lot of people.
How many times have we heard about people getting arrested for their 5th, 6th, 7th DUI? The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has said if all 17 million people who admitted to driving drunk had their own state, it would be the 5th largest in the U.S.
Wow. Well, this afternoon, we're seeing the effects of drunk driving firsthand as a man who admitted to drinking excessively before getting behind the wheel is lucky to be alive. Officer Kyle Johnson rushes down the road. That's where he sees a Chevy Silverado on fire.
I exited my vehicle and just pretty much took off for the vehicle that was on fire.
We've got him out. Get fire out here. It's engulfed.
At the time, Officer Johnson says he wasn't sure if anyone was hurt. You can see in the dash cam video 2 other cars pulled off to the side of the road trying to see if someone was inside.
At this time of night, typically it's usually people who are under the influence. But my immediate thoughts were just preserve life. As I came up on the ravine, I noticed that it actually was pretty deep. The whole truck was down in it.
When Kyle ran up to the burning truck, he actually saw 40-year-old Gregory Bosley get out, but he was stuck in the ravine.
He fell into the water down here in this ravine bed, and I just basically hopped down there, grabbed him, and drug him out.
Bosley was dragged about 30 yards, nearly halfway down this field by Officer Johnson. He was taken to a hospital to treat a few minor cuts and bruises, then arrested.
It was pretty dumbfounding, really, that he didn't even really sustain any injuries other than minor scrapes.
Police say Gregory Bosley admitted he had been drinking excessively when he crashed into that ravine. And while we may call that heroic, officers say it's just part of their job.
We can't pay these guys enough. Unfortunately, it's a part of their job that they are seeing a lot of these days. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, every day, almost 30 people are killed in the United States from a crash that involves a driver who's been drinking. To break down those numbers, that's about 1 death every 48 minutes. The CDC reports in 2010, more than 10,000 people were killed in alcohol-impaired crashes, making up nearly 1/3 of all traffic-related deaths in the U.S. And if that's not enough to shake you to the core, consider this. Studies show the average drunk driver has driven 80 times before their first arrest. That's not 8, that's 80 times.
Well, you know, Jimmy, it's anyone's guess as to why people decide to get behind the wheel after drinking. Maybe they don't know the consequences.
That's the problem. One thing is clear, new laws on Delmarva are trying to put a stop to drinking and driving. So joining us today to tell us more about it is Jon Horner, who's an associate at Tunnell and Raysor in Sussex County. Jon, thank you for coming in.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. So there is new legislation in Delaware focused on this problem.
Absolutely. Just yesterday was passed a law requiring ignition interlock devices for all DUI violations. Prior to that, you only were required to get an ignition interlock device if you had multiple offenses or if it was a first offense and your blood alcohol content was above 0.15. But now every violation is requiring the ignition interlock device.
Okay, so how do they work?
Well, what it does is it's installed in your car, and it's fairly expensive to install, so it further adds to the cost of the DUI itself. It requires you to blow into it prior to starting the car.
Okay.
When you blow into it, you have to provide a sample that is free from alcohol below a certain threshold, and then the car can be driven. But after that, intermittently while driving, it will also require you to blow a sample. If you cannot provide a sample while you are driving, it will log the event, and that could serve as a violation of your probation or a violation of your conditional driving license.
Okay. Now, there are different levels of penalties, I guess you'd say, depending on the offense. You can have multiple offenses. Let's start with the first-time offense. What is threatening us for a first-time offense?
Absolutely. The penalties do vary, and specifically with Delaware, every state's a little different. But in Delaware, you're going to have a maximum of 6 months in jail, fines of up to $1,500, a license suspension up to 24 months that varies based on your blood alcohol content.
Yeah.
And likely you're going to have a course of instruction, substance abuse classes as part of a condition of your sentencing.
And this is Delaware.
This is Delaware, correct.
All right. You know, moments ago we touched on a driver who had multiple DUI offenses. How do they continue to drive with all of these offenses?
Well, often if they're irresponsible enough to drive intoxicated, they are irresponsible enough to drive without a license. I would say many of the repeat offenders that I see in my practice are also charged with driving with a suspended license. So a lot of times their licenses are suspended, and first, second, and third, and further offenses, the suspensions increase. So they're just driving irrespective of whether or not they have a license.
I'm glad you brought that up. So let's go ahead and jump in there. Let's say a fourth offense. What kind of penalties are we looking at?
A fourth offense, you're looking at a 5-year license suspension in Delaware.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
No question about it.
Statutorily, 5 years.
Okay.
Okay, and those who have a couple of arrests, they can really face some serious consequences.
Absolutely. We went over the first offense penalty, but after that, in Delaware, mandatory jail time starts with your second conviction. If you're convicted of a second DUI offense in Delaware, you're going to get 60 days in jail. The judge has no discretion. Your third offense automatically bumps the charge up to a Class G felony with a minimum penalty of 1 year in jail. That, again, the judge has no discretion on. The penalties increase per DUI all the way up to a maximum of the 7th and beyond, where you're going to have a minimum of 10 years in jail, which, again, the judge has no discretion. If you're convicted of that 7th DUI, you're going to jail for 10 years. Plus also, there's usually other crimes that are involved, whether it be driving with a suspended license, or if you hit somebody, a vehicular assault, or if you kill somebody, vehicular homicide, where that can really put you in jail for a very long time.
That's some pretty serious stuff there.
Absolutely.
Which should be enough to teach me I'm not going to drink and drive. But what if I'm involved in an accident with another driver who turns out to be drunk and either takes off or stays? What do I do then?
Well, you have the same remedies as if you were hit by any other driver. I recommend obtaining a lawyer if you've been injured. You can seek insurance to cover your bills, sue them for the damages. Additionally, if they are charged with a DUI, the prosecutors will often consult with you, and you're even allowed to give a victim impact statement. So there's a range of sentencing, and if somebody, if say it was their first DUI, the judge may say, well, normally they wouldn't get time, but if a victim gives a strong impact statement and says, this is how my life was greatly affected by this, you could potentially increase their criminal penalties.
All right, John, we're coming up on a holiday weekend, 3-day weekend. A lot of folks may be planning on doing some drinking. Any advice for those who maybe are considering drinking and driving?
Don't drink and drive.
Yeah.
I know that's the clear-cut answer. Taxi cabs, sober drivers, anything you can do. Holiday weekend, they're out there looking for you even more. There's lots of cars on the road. In the beach areas, there's tons of pedestrians. We want everybody to stay safe so they can enjoy the beaches. So plan ahead, either get a taxi or a sober driver, and help keep everybody safe.
Think it through, be careful. Jon Horner, thank you so much. Appreciate you coming in today.
Absolutely.
And if you'd like to read more about the Tunnell and Raysor Law Firm, go to WBOC.com and click on our picture at the top of the page. When it comes to driving with your dog in the car with you, there are really no rules. So what happens if you're in a crash? Well, some people use special harnesses to secure their dogs, but are they safe? We'll tell you what a recent crash test revealed.
And a little later on, here's somebody who secured a place in the history books. Tennis superstar Lindsay Davenport talks with us about her amazing career, including her induction into the Tennis Hall of Fame, plus whether she thinks any of her 4 children will follow in her footsteps. Delmarva Live. We'll be right back.